Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start our afternoon session. Please have a seat and welcome, Joe Pedro.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope you all had a very good discussion on the basis of Natalie's presentation that came right before lunch. And of course, I have the hard part of, and I hope you all have drank enough coffee and not too sleepy now. So by the time coffee break comes, everybody will have forgotten my presentation, but that's okay. I'll be around if anybody has any questions. We'll try to move this very quickly, and the idea here is really to share with you not so much the messages of the report itself, but really, I think, an innovation that we have introduced in this latest SDG report that UNICEF produced that precisely try to tackle some of the issues that we discussed in the morning sessions, including how to increase the policy relevance of what we do, how to create hooks to have meaningful conversations at the global, regional, country level. So hopefully this will inspire some conversations. So I think the context of the work is very much the view that in order to have value, data needs narratives, and it is the analytics that extracts the value of data. And so it's not enough to just produce those indicators, right? We need to build narratives, and we need to help create and co-create these narratives. And from our perspective, we think as UNICEF, it is important to also extract value from these global databases that are constructed to inform the global conversations, regional, and of course, more importantly, the national ones, right? Because that's where change occurs. It's on the countries, it's through the policies and conversations that are happening in your countries. And we see this work not necessarily as something that will drive what are the development challenges or the understanding in the country. We see it also as potentially an illustration of methodological approaches that could be used by you in your countries with your data, with your indicators, right? And for that reason, as we were embarking in this activity, in this work, we focused not only on the report itself, but on the process through which the report was generated. And what we mean by that is really we've embraced the concept of reproducible and scalable analytics, and we created workflows that draw from APIs, and we are using GitHub, depositing the code, so anybody here can actually get access to the code that we have used, find mistakes, please let us know, or hack it, and reuse it in any way, shape, or form that you deem necessary. Now, I think part of what we tried in this report as well was to shift the narrative from the traditional way in which we have done it, which is classifying countries as on track, off track, target met, right? Because we feel that although this is important and that simplifies too much the message, and most governments know that that acceleration is needed or that they are off track, right? So what we wanted was to kind of apply two lenses. One being how much effort is required by countries to meet the 2030 target, but also give them credit about the recent historical progress that have been achieved, right? And the reason for that, and I think that's a bit of a message that gets lost a bit on our narratives, is that tremendous progress has been made, especially in the countries that were lagging the furthest behind. Of course, you can argue that it was easier for them to make progress, but many of those have not made as much progress, right? There are certain countries that have made progress, others have not. So we need to give credit to those that have, also from a perspective of learning from each other. Oops, and I did not want to do this. And okay, and I figure out how to so the challenge that we had in this report is that we were looking at 48 child-related SDG indicators, and one thing that we've used in our narrative quite deliberately is we emphasize the indicator aspect of this, and deliberately we said that, look, not because these are SDGs, and sorry, but because these are good indicators. These are indicators that have good metadata, that have good methodology, that they're part of a global conversation in terms of how you go about measuring those things. And because we know that in practice, many governments in the context of their national development plans are using very similar indicators. And that, I think, it helps, I think, also convey that value. But of course, we were looking at 48 indicators, very different definitions, very different scales. Some of them are poverty, some share of kids reaching minimum proficiency level in learning. So we had to standardize them, standardize the narrative, and the choice that we've made was to use percentile ranks, right? Very much kind of a Z-score in nutrition or what education does in learning, right? And the reason for that is because if I tell you that poverty rate is 30%, or that child marriage is 20%, or it has reduced it by 2 percentage points, unless you have deep knowledge about these indicators, you have no idea if this is good or bad, if this is a lot or little, right? It basically has no clear policy interpretability. So the idea of using the percentile ranks was to move beyond that and actually tell you, look, the number is 30, but the percentile rank is the 80th percentile rank, or that this 2 percentage point in reduction in open defecation actually puts you in the 97th percentile of performance in recorded history. Right, that gives you interpretability to the number. And I think that's important, I think, as statisticians, for us to also, we complain that sometimes we are not part of the conversation with the policymakers. I think a lot of times because policymakers don't understand what our numbers mean, and we don't make it easier for them. So I think the attempt here was to use percentile ranks for that purpose. And we use it both to look at the benchmark, the values, but also benchmark the rate of change, the historical. And essentially what we are doing is we create different reference groups. We use the global, but we also do it by income grouping. We do it by geographical region. We do it by initial conditions of the indicator. But essentially what we are doing, and this is an illustration with neonatal mortality, right? We have a global empirical distribution of the annualized rate of change of this indicator, and we plot what is the rank percentile that each country is on average, right? And if you look at the global standard, right, Georgia is close to the 90th percentile, Brazil, it's above the 70th, Belize above the 40th, France and Austria, close to the 20th percentile, for obvious reasons, because they are closer to the frontier already. But we also create the same benchmark using income groupings. And you see that once you go from a global to a benchmark that is on income groupings, the rank percentiles, the places where countries lie, change, right? Because then you're comparing apples that look like oranges, right? As opposed to things that look, completely different. So France, Belize, and Austria are further aligned. Brazil and Georgia is slightly different. So we basically use this, right, to basically create this narrative and aggregate them and show what is in the blue dot the equivalent rank percentile that countries are on average by, and we group indicators by these goal areas: survive and thrive, learning, protection from harm, safe and clean environment, and life free of poverty. And we plot where they are, right, in blue, and orange what their target equivalent would be in terms of the rank percentile. And the reason for that is just to have conversations and to basically see that different goal areas or different types of indicators actually require very different levels of efforts, right? You will notice that some of these indicators are above the 100th percentile, like in protection from harm. And the reason is that the universality target that we aspire in violence against children or child marriage, no country has ever been there. So when we actually translate that into a percentile rank, it actually extrapolates the 100th percentile by 12 percentage points on average, right? And that is, I think, something, and while in others, such as learning education, right, we see that the effort required by countries seems to be way more aligned. We do this also on the rate of change, right? And there are some insights that you get in terms of where the issues are by different income groupings. So you can see that overweight and reading proficiency at lower secondary tends to be more of a challenge in high income, upper middle income countries. Issues like stunting and wasting, birth registry or clean and water, more of an issue in lower and middle income countries or lower and low income countries. Some of this because of data gaps, right? And of course, part of this was the idea of creating these heat maps that allowed us to look at several of these indicators in several countries at once. And the reason for that is because what we also notice through this perspective, through these lenses, is that we do find countries that are making systematic progress on several indicators across very different sectors. And that for us is really important, right? Because it's not just a program or one set of interventions or a champion here and there that are making a difference. This is something systematically that is happening across several indicators, right? And you have countries like India, Cambodia that highlight on this. Afghanistan as well, but for very different reasons, right? Afghanistan, because the analysis is dated and it ends, the latest data point is 2021, before the change of regime. These are countries that started from a very low base, and a lot of progress was made when the international community was able to support the country. This, of course, it's no longer the case, right? And part of what we are doing as well is creating these country briefs, right, which are deep dives on each country, where we also try to highlight what are the places where we have absolutely no data, what are the places where there's some data but no trend data, so there's only one data point. What are the indicators for which no target has been set, right, from the point of view of the global community, right? And this is particularly important for UNESCO. And of course, we do this also, we unpack this for each and every indicator. And part of the idea here, again, is to have conversations, right? For countries to see where they are, where they aspire to be, right? And of course, all of this, the targets that we're using here are the equivalent targets that come out of the SDG process. All of these analytics, because the code is freely available and open to anybody, can be adjusted and hacked and tempered as you see fit. So this is the GitHub, that it's a very important part of what we are doing now in order to give transparency and improve collaboration. And this is the slide that I blame Steve because of my first week in my job. So I started like 7 months ago. I had the pleasure to be in a meeting with Steve and Mariana, and I heard them talking about precisely what Steve was saying earlier today about how transformational the SDG process had been. And that stayed on my mind throughout all these months. So when this SDG report opportunity came about, I thought, I need to have at least a box on that story. So this is to you, Steve, right, and Mariana. And precisely what we are trying to do here is to illustrate that for many issues that were even present in the Convention of Rights of Children back in '89, such as quality of education, violence against children, early childhood development, right? We had agreed as a global community that those things were important, but we had no global alignment or consensus on how to measure these things, right? And what the SDG process has done or did was create targets, those are the red dots, right, with no measure ever being attempted to be done on this. And I would argue in a radically fast period of time, we're able to go from a global target and aspiration to an indicator. And in some cases, like in education, thanks to the leadership of UIS, country targets on many of these issues, country-owned targets. And of course, that's very different from other areas like stunting, poverty, under 5 mortality, in which the measure preceded the global commitment on what to do about it, right? So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, João Pedro, for this excellent presentation. Now, I'm going to collect 3 questions because we're still behind the schedule. So the floor is yours. Be fast if you would like to be one of the 3. No questions. Actually, it was nobody? Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, our next presenter is going to be Heather about the gender snapshot, the latest issue.
I only have 2 minutes. Okay, go read it. I'll do 20 seconds. Okay, so thank you so much. I am presenting on the progress. Thank you. Okay, yeah, got it. Thank you so much. The progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, the Gender Snapshot 2023. We have a couple copies in the back. Please take them so we don't take them back in our luggage. We would love for you to have them. Okay, I still can't. Without a doubt, gender equality is essential for the SDGs and to fulfill the promises enshrined in the 2030 agenda. I think we all agree with this. If you don't, come, I'll talk to you. It's not working. Why doesn't it like me? So the Gender Snapshot 2023 was launched on the 7th of September, and this presents the latest evidence on gender equality across all 17 goals, including prevailing trends and gaps on the road to 2030. This report is part of an annual series that's produced by UN Women and UNDESA. So these are the last 4 years previous to this year. So recent setbacks, particularly among women and girls living in fragile or conflict-affected countries, and growing vulnerability brought on by human-induced climate change, are worsening the outlook of making gender equality a reality by 2030. This latest global assessment reveals a long road ahead, particularly when only 2 Goal 5 indicators are close to target, 8 are at a moderate distance from the target, and 4 are far or very far from the 2030 targets. I'll just very briefly go over just a few of the findings. If current trends continue, close to 1 in 4 women and girls worldwide will be moderately or severely food insecure by 2030, and this will only worsen with the impacts of climate change. And just to note, we'll put the expanded presentation online if you'd like to see some additional findings from some of the other goals. What's nice about this report is that it covers all 17 goals from a gender lens. And so active resistance and lackluster commitment to gender equality, as well as chronic underinvestment, are significant factors contributing to low progress and, in some cases, the reversal of gains already made. Many parts of the world have yet to develop strong legal frameworks. For instance, 54% of countries still lack key laws on gender equality, including on equal rights to intermarriage and initiate a divorce. So we also have a continued failure to prioritize SDG 5, which essentially puts the entirety of the agenda in peril. Just some of the findings as well. Globally, women hold just 27% of seats in parliament. And at the current rate of progress, by 2050, women will still spend, on average, 2.3 more hours per day on unpaid care and domestic work than men. And also, with the current slow pace of change, the women's share of workplace management positions will only reach 30% by 2030. So disrupted careers, care responsibilities, and wage discrimination also mean that women only earn 1/3 of the labor income globally. And in the interest of time, I think this is my last one. We're also facing an existential crisis, particularly for women and girls. Under a worst-case climate scenario by 2050, as many as 158 million more women and girls will be pushed into poverty, 16 million more than the total number of men and boys. And while these findings are bleak, the report also makes clear that all hope is not lost. It's an urgent call for action, as well as a report on the findings. We still have time to take decisive actions to accelerate gender equality to achieve the SDGs. But it will require explicit attention to resources, starting with this was also a finding in the report, with an additional $360 billion per year needed as part of a gender-focused stimulus package to achieve gender equality and women's empowerment across key global goals. Additional priority actions must also be taken, including addressing institutional barriers through removing discriminatory laws, expanding women's participation and leadership in decision-making, and right-sizing investments in gender equality at all levels, national, regional, and global levels, in order to accelerate progress by 2030. So I invite you to explore the report online and pick up a few copies in the back, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. That was 5 minutes, so thank you. Any questions, if you may have?
Thank you, Heather. I really like your excellent presentation about gender equality. I'm sitting from National Bureau of Statistics of China, and I would like to take this chance to share some Chinese experiences and ask a quick question. China attaches great importance to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, integrating this work with long-term development strategies, such as the 14th Five-Year Plans, aiming to achieve positive progress on the SDG indicators in 2025, and take Goal 3 as example. In China, the Women and the Children Development Outline 2021 to 2030 includes the goals of indicators 3.1 and 3.2. By 2030, the maternal mortality rate will be reduced to below 12 per 100,000, and the under 5 mortality rate will be reduced to 6 per 1,000. And the neonatal mortality rate will be reduced to 3 per 1,000. So the goals we have set are higher than the requirements of the SDGs. And we have also made a lot of efforts to improve data availability of Goal 5, gender equality. Take the indicator 5.4 as an example. Time spent on unpaid domestic and care work needs to be obtained through time use survey. And the National Bureau of Statistics of China conducted the first and the second time use surveys in 2008 and 2018. And we will increase the frequency of the survey and conduct the third time use survey in the next year. So therefore, we will have the new data resources for indicator 5.4 before 2025 comprehensive review. Of course, I also have a small question for you. So many countries have calculated the monetary value of unpaid household service work using time use data to complement their national GDP. So how do you think about the future of the care economy and time use survey in gender statistics? Thank you.
Any more question, comment? Thank you. Okay.
Quick answer. So we will bring this question back to our colleagues in social statistics because they're working on this time user survey. And so, yeah, we don't have the straight answer, but we'll ask. But we'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so our next presenter is going to be Oliver Fiala. He is from Save the Children. He's going to talk about about the Child Atlas.
Oh, no. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share our work we have done in the space of making data available and usable for our colleagues, but also for everyone else out there. So I wanted to share with you our work on the Child Atlas. The Child Atlas is our way to understand children's lives through the power of data, as I put it on the slide, but it's really a way to make data accessible, but also to bring out new analytics and new ways to think about the data and to create narratives. So we, and hopefully, so you see some of the movement in the background so that you have a bit of an idea of what the Atlas looks like. we are covering roughly 100 indicators, not all of them SDG indicators, but they cover outcome, a lot of child-related outcomes. They cover policies, but also financing decisions. And they are trying to shed light also on crisis, insecurity, so indicators which reflect a lot of the kind of discussions around polycrisis and overlapping crisis. Now, just to add, a lot of the data comes from global databases, so it's a lot to all of your hard work that we're able to use the data and create those tools. But it wouldn't be as easy or as possible at all to do that. We are trying to link into APIs. A lot of global organizations have built. So again, thank you very much for that, which gives a lot of more credibility, but also timely updates, etc. But we also include data from civil society and academia, specifically when it's about think of civic space in the country or availability and consultation during budget processes and information like that, which are really valuable for us. Now you might say, rightly so, why do we need another platform? There are a lot out there. And we certainly had the question ourselves. We saw 3 benefits why we think the Child Atlas has something to offer, maybe not as a tool to solve all of those things, but to spark those discussions and to help others to create things. So the first one is to map inequalities. So that has always been a strong focus for us as a civil society organization, is to highlight disaggregated data and make that as available as possible. So we are, again, plugging into those available data sets, but we do also analyze DHS and MIGS, so household surveys, health and demographic surveys ourselves to highlight a lot of the inequalities where it maybe wouldn't easily exist. And then either aggregate on a global level, or you will find country pages for a lot of low and middle income countries where we have much more detailed data, including subnational information, etc. But so for us, this is obviously really important to support the pledge to leave no one behind, to enabling meaningful support in VNR processes and so on. And just to add that maybe on there, it's really great to see it in the global databases, more and more disaggregated data coming in. But as you're all probably aware of, there's still a lot of gaps even where data does exist. So there's, I think, more work for all of us. The second bit, which I want to which I'm personally most excited about, is the idea to overlap data, right? There's a lot of in the policy space, and I'm sure that's the same in many other organizations and countries. There's a lot of focus on the poly crisis, on overlapping crisis, whatever word you want to use. But the idea that problems are not happening in isolation, right? And there are a lot of fantastic data sets, but often those data sets are isolated to a certain sector, to a certain topic. So we try to enable those kind of overlapping analysis a little bit more. So in this case, we have child marriage as a first indicator, and then you can choose a second indicator and you get those kind of bivariate maps where you have the overlap between 2 data sources. So you will see on the one hand, in colors, you see the rate of child marriage, and then in those patterns, you see the rate, in this case, of children which are affected by conflict. And it obviously doesn't enable any kind of causality, right? You cannot say children in conflict are more likely to get married, but it enables a discussion. Like, are there hotspots? Are there countries where we see both problems being really prominent, and enables conversation and further analysis. So I think this is hopefully a really helpful way to think about that. That's by far not the only way to think about how data overlap or how topics overlap. But we thought it's one relatively easy, accessible way to understand that. And for some of the countries, you can also do that on a subnational level where the data exists for certain indicators. But it's not only helping us to point out problems, which maybe is the first thing civil society does, but it also helps us to point a little bit to policy solutions. So for example, I have here the first indicator, the UHC coverage index, and the second one, health financing. Just to illustrate not only is there a problem overlapping with an outcome, but also how are outcomes and policy choices related? Like, if we spend more money, it maybe not too surprisingly, you see that on average, countries who spend more money on health also have better outcomes when it comes to health systems. But you also see that this is not a perfect correlation, right? There are a lot of countries which spend equal amounts of money and have very different outcomes. So again, it's just sparking those kind of conversations. And I promised you 3 things where we think we can add value. And the third thing is hearing directly from children. And that links a little bit to what we heard earlier about citizen-generated data. So it's by far not as academic or as solid as the process and framework you're developing in that space. But it's our idea just to add a bit more depth and a bit more insights into the statistics. So basically, there are lots of quotes we have from child hearing exercises across the world, and we try to tag them and link them to different data. So if you look at data about child marriage, you should be able to see voices from girls who are affected by those issues. So all of that, as I was saying, as this global tool, I won't go into the detail, but we do have, for a lot of countries, like subnational tools where you see more inequality and data, more disaggregated data, subnational information, and so on. And just to close it, and hopefully I'm still within the time, but we do have a blog function where we try to, over time, to build a bit of a repository, just explaining the data from our perspective, where colleagues are having a story to tell or they're having a particular insight to share. And again, the idea is those blocks are getting tagged to indicators. So over time, if you look at a certain indicator where we wrote a lot, you will hopefully see those blocks coming up, and you can see the data a bit more in context. And we also, maybe that's for interest for some of you, we do experiment with like AI being able to explain some of the data. We're not to like make up data, but we're giving the data to the API and asking it to just describe it. Like, this country has higher rates than this country, or this group is most affected. It's very much an experiment, so it doesn't work perfectly. Sometimes you go on the page and it works well, and sometimes it doesn't work at all, and it's obviously not consistent. So our developer still looks at that, but I can share some more experiences bilaterally if that's of interest. And yeah, that's me. Just to say, the data is all thanks to you, and the platform is freely available. It's very much a first iteration, so any thoughts, any feedback, very much appreciated. And otherwise, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Oliver. It was really nice. If you have questions, comments, please go ahead. India. The floor is yours.
Yeah, that's quite impressive visualization. So just I'm wondering if can one use his own data to get those visualization, or your data is pre-filled? If I want to put my data on that and to get such kind of visualization, can one do it or not?
Yeah, go
Can I
ahead.
just no, so that's at the moment not possible, but it's a great suggestion and certainly something we thought about at some point. So at the moment, it's just the data we are basically putting into the back end. But no, it's a great idea because some of the analytical sites I think could be relevant for different partners and different organizations. Thank you.
Any more questions, comments?
Thank you. I'm Australia Lahom from UNICEF. I coordinate the International Data Alliance for Children on the Move. Oliver, this is very exciting to hear because IDAC, that's the acronym of this alliance, is actually supported by Save the Children. You are co-chairing one of our working groups on innovation. And I think that you've just presented there a building block for one of the deliverables that we are committing to the European Union International Partnerships Directorate General to establish a comprehensive database and a data portal, bringing together the disparate sources of information on migration and displacement, but focused on child-specific data. And I think that would be one of the subsections of that atlas. And I look forward to being guided by you on how we can really bring out what are the relevant data bases, data points that we need to gather to shed light on the specific vulnerabilities of migrant and displaced children, which is one of the more politically difficult issues that we are facing as an international community. So thank you very much for that. I'll be reaching out to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, very happy to chat more about that.
Any more questions, comments? Oliver, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so we are at the end of this section. It was really pleasant. It was really nice to be here. Anyway, so
Thank you.
thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we are having the session in terms of lightning talks and e-learnings, publications, and other initiatives. It's scheduled for 25 minutes, but we are behind time, so we're trying to make it even more concise. So for the presenters, if you can do your presentation in 15 characters or less. Just a joke. So first we have a presentation on small area estimation by UNSD. So Heather, please.
Sorry, I was trying to round up everybody to come up to the podium. Okay, so building capacities on small area estimation. There's a toolkit. Thank you. There's a toolkit that's available on Wikispace that provides information on methods to produce disaggregated data through small area estimation. This was launched in March 2022 by UNSD, supported by the IAEG-SDGs and the Intersecretariat Working Group on Household Surveys. Newly available software packages and case studies continue to be added. In addition, launched in August 2023 is the e-learning on SAE. This is a joint effort of ECLAC, UNSD, and UNFPA. So the e-learning includes reading materials, recorded videos in 10 modules, evaluation materials, and there are currently 435 self-paced students on the platform, guided learning sessions, and CEP will continue to support for countries in the Asia Pacific next year. And then last slide, we are working with the World Bank jointly on a report on the use of geospatial data for SAE, drawing on literature and existing experiences. This is that we've shared an annotated outline with the IAEG-SDGs and the GGIM, and we'll share the draft for input and review shortly. So the timeline for this is kind of the end of 2023, and looking at kind of an overview of SAE method and geospatial SAE methods. So this is kind of future research and work. And done.
Thank you. So we go right next into the next presentation, Population Data Portal by UNFPA. So if you have any questions or comments, you save it to the end when you have a chance to ask any of the presenters a question or comment.
Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Allow me to introduce you to the UNFPA's new population data portal. So this is our new corporate data portal on UNFPA's key mandate on international conference on population and development, but also on Agenda 2030. And there, the tool is very user-friendly. Our goal is to put disaggregated high-quality population data at the fingertips of their policymakers, program managers, general public, whether they are data experts or not. So where we were before was a scattering of different population data sources, like you see from the left. And what we did is that we integrate a wide range of different population data sources in a very powerful geospatial enabled platform, and we do the data processing, and the output actually is based on use case approaches. So here are just a few examples. We track SDGs and ICPD, and we ensure leaving no one behind. How we do that? All the indicators in the population data portal are disaggregated by leaving no one behind factors, as well as available at the subnational level. We also, as I mentioned, this is a very powerful geo portal, so that's why we could actually use this for programming purposes. When we overlay different population data layers as well as their GIS layers, we can actually enable more targeted country programming and interventions. We also aim to disseminate the latest population census data, which is a very ambitious goal, and we have to work together with everyone here. And in that process, we support the countries to disseminate their data. So, so just a little bit note about sharing the country level data. So we start with because PDP is a global portal, so we actually start with the global data, sources such as the sample census data from IPOM, such as the household survey data, such as DHS and mix. But also gradually we receive lots of requests from our countries saying that, I really want to see this type of country level data in the PDP, whether it's DHIS2, health facility data or main data CRVS. So that's why we developed this annual exercise that we can work with the country through our UNFPA country offices to make sure the country level data is also available in the PDP. And we also draw a lot of data from their colleagues actually sitting here through the APIs. And we really welcome, data exchange with all of you, welcome your feedback, and they're working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation is on inclusive data and persons with disabilities by the International Disability Alliance. Jose, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, and on behalf of the International Disability Alliance and other stakeholders working on inclusive data for persons with disabilities, we want to extend our gratitude to the organizers of this conference for having us once again and presenting on what we are doing regarding engaging persons with disabilities more in this very important agenda. Today, and I understand we already have the PowerPoint presentation on, I want to share 3 concrete examples of what we are doing in order to advance the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the data agenda. The first experience is what we call a workshop for organization of persons with disabilities and data. We have developed a training course that can be both online and in person with 8 interactive modules. This package of knowledge has been produced or co-produced by the International Disability Alliance, the UN stakeholder per group of persons with disabilities, CBM Global, Disability Inclusion, and UNFPA Asia Pacific. And we have already conducted the first training in the Republic of Congo. We are doing it soon in Laos and next year in Bolivia. And the importance of these workshops are basically the fact that persons with disabilities are more knowledgeable in terms of asking for more data, collecting data, and using data for policy discussions and programming. The second experience, it's we have started to collect country case studies, where we basically are looking into how organizations of persons with disabilities in different countries are able to engage in data discussions, but more importantly, how the data that governments are collecting can be used for programs and policies, for instance, on inclusive education, gender issues, et cetera, et cetera. And if we can go to the next slide, please. The last and maybe not only our newest engagement, but the most promising is that we have just partnered with Fordham University in the US to actually start looking how the internationally comparable data can be accessible for persons with disabilities. We clearly understand that the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the human rights agenda can only be further implemented if we start comparing data across the world. And for that, we are working with Fordham University to make reports that are accessible and inclusive, because as you may know, one of the biggest barriers that persons with disabilities we face when accessing data is the lack of accessibility. So these reports that are being produced on a country basis have tables and different elements that are accessible and inclusive for persons with disabilities. And that project is in the context of the Disability Initiative hosted by Fordham University. So these 3 examples that I've just shared and that we are continuing working try to address or to close the gap in the idea or in the conviction that persons with disabilities and their organizations can collect better data, ask for better data to governments, be a key player in the citizen-generated data agenda, and even more importantly, start using data to make better decisions around the inclusion of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose, for that presentation. We move on to the next by the International Civil Center. Peter, leave no one behind.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Gublowski. I work for the International Civil Society Center. We are a international platform for NGOs based in Berlin. And I'm saying a few words today about the Leave No One Behind partnership, which is a coalition of about 100 NGOs active in 8 countries, working towards making the voices of marginalized groups heard and count using citizen-generated data. Our background is, of course, Agenda 2030 and the Universal Pledge to Leave No One Behind. We came together in 2017 based on the perception of most NGOs that there is scarce or non-existent data on these marginalized groups, and also that official statistics in that regard are insufficient. At the same time, we know that civil society have a good reach to marginalized groups and also hold a lot of data. However, there's no recognition of this data. Another point for us, of course, is the active participation of these groups in the VNR and in the SDG process, which always has been perceived to be too low. And as a result of these two factors, too little data, too little inclusion, there are gaps in the public planning about these groups. There are faulty policies, faulty services, which don't reach these groups sufficiently. So our impression was the ambition to leave no one behind is at risk. So our goal is, as I said, is making voices heard and count. For us, that means that country SDG priorities are inclusive of marginalized groups and that public services and policies are informed by community voices, also in the sense of community-driven data. What is now community-driven data, citizen-generated data? It's usually a mix, a methodology mix of both quantitative and qualitative data. We work with household surveys similar to statistics offices, but we have a lot of qualitative tools as well, working with focus group discussions, key informant interviews, community scorecards, and other tools. And for us, this mixture is relevant to identify intersecting drivers that lead to the exclusion of these communities. And no, it's not working anymore. Maybe you can do it manually. Thanks. As an example, one of the recent reports from Bangladesh, we have a coalition there, which is also led by BRAC, the largest NGO in the world. They made a scorecard exercise, which is a social accountability tool, meaning it gives citizens the possibility to give feedback to government services. And in that case, this was conducted in 64 districts, reaching out, for example, to sex workers, urban floating population, Dalits, nomad tribes. And through this exercise, they had actually the opportunity to give a feedback in how far they think they're properly reached by existing health services of government, and what's the accessibility, what's the quality of these services. As a result, we discussed with the Bangladesh government, and they're now considering to adopt also this scorecard approach in one of their programs. They want to introduce a national health card, and they want to see in how far this approach can help to make the health card more accessible to marginalized groups. Next slide, please. We have heard already a little bit before about the Citizen Data Collaborative, very important. This was a really good year for this kind of work that we're doing. You have heard it has been launched earlier this year at the Statistics Commission and at the UN World Data Forum. We have entered into negotiations with some governments. In Malawi, we recently signed an MOU with the National Statistic Office to work on a national toolkit on the citizen-generated data. In Vietnam, we're already producing one together with the Ministry of Planning and the Statistics Office. Bangladesh will sign an MOU with us probably next month. And in India, we also are opening some first discussions with the government to see in how far citizen-generated data could be complementary source for this, getting disability data. Yes, we received some funds from various donors on this work. The Copenhagen agreement has been signed, and sorry, now I see something is going wrong with that slide. But overall, I would say this was a really good year for citizen-generated data. And the outlook, and last slide for me, is really to say, we are happy that this gets increasingly recognized, but in terms of using it here, IAEG-SDGs and the SDG context, it's significantly underutilized. And the collaboration between civil society and government in that regard remains rather the exception than the rule. And I can really tell all of the NSOs here, we would be happy if you join the Citizen Data Collaborative, join the discussions, see what's going on, see how you can also benefit from this. because we heard several times today there are new initiatives coming up. The expectations into NSOs increase to produce data here and produce data there. Actually, citizen-generated data can help you to fill some gaps. And I'm aware it needs some initial investment, but I'm sure in the long run, this will pay off for NSOs and for civil society likewise. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now our last presentation in this session on interlinkages between the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you. Such an opportunity to introduce our book, freshly out of the printing press, to such an expert audience. It's a book that Yonggi and I have been working together for almost 2 years. And the book provides an in-depth analysis of the interlinkages between the economic, social, we can go to the next slide, economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development, and 5 pillars of SDGs: peace, people, planet, prosperity, and partnerships. And here is the book for you, in case you want to take a look later on. It's going to be around here. And it examines interlinkages at thematic, regional, country level, and features studies from across the globe. And contributors range from academics and experts and practitioners. So let me just hand it over to Yonggi to talk a bit more.
Yeah, thank you. It has been a great pleasure to work with the 20 experts. So I just want to correct Sven. I didn't write the book. I just invite 20 excellent experts in this field to write the book. So that's my job, not writing the book. So basically, the 20 experts focus on different areas of interlinkage, look at the areas to methodology and the data collection to facilitate the quantification and the analysis of SDG interlinkage. For example, there's from country example, the pattern of sustainability and policy coherence. And this lesson learned from Sweden and the global SDG follow-up. And there's also like improved data availability in Colombia to find the interlinkage across the 2030 agenda. That's from country perspective. We have many tools to look at interlinkage. For example, there's a quantitative approach to explore synergies and trade-off among the SDGs. And there's a network analysis of SDG interlinkage. And there's another integrated approach in the SDG from an interlinkage perspective. It is a free online tool and developed by an institution, environment institution in Japan. And there's also the measure global interlinkage between the SDGs applying linear dimensionality reduction tools. So and then also from a thematic point of view, so basically there's a gendered impact of climate change, the evidence from Asia, and also the mainstream gender in the environment goes across the SDG monitoring framework. There's just a few examples. So the book's here, and we just welcome you to take a look. Thank you very much.
So thank you for that presentation and congratulations on the book. So we just had 5 presentations, very concise, very informative. So I now open up the floor in terms of any questions, comments. Okay, so the presentations were so concise and so informative. Everything was lucidly clear or clear like mud, one of the two. All right. Okay, so we bring this session to the close. Yes, thank you very much. Again, to the presenters, round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will start to the agenda item 10 about data partnership and the capacity development for the SDGs. This section will offer an opportunity for countries to specify capacity development needs for monitoring the SDGs and for agencies and stakeholders to highlight current partnerships or capacity building opportunities available for countries. I invite the first speaker, Dennis, about partnership monitoring at the subnational level and CBMS.
Statisticians and colleagues, good afternoon.
8 minutes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, esteemed statisticians and colleagues, good afternoon. I am Dennis Mapa, National Statistician and Civil Registrar General of the Philippines. And in this presentation, I will share the Philippine practices in monitoring the Sustainable Development Goals. My talk will cover background on the SDG monitoring in the Philippines, our coordination mechanisms.
We can't hear you. Unmute, please.
The relevant statistical products and policy support, our practice to monitor SDG at the local level,
Hearing.
and lastly, our plans for the SDG monitoring.
Maybe the connection's not good.
Can I?
We still cannot hear him.
Can I be heard?
Oh my God.
Can you hear me at the plenary?
I think he is on mute.
I can hear him in WebEx.
Can you unmute yourself? We cannot hear you.
Okay, for a while.
Yeah.
Hello?
No.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Chat.
Can you hear me now?
And he is speaking.
Hello?
1 second. 1 second, Dr.
Okay.
Mapa. I could hear you in WebEx, but the room cannot hear you.
We can hear him now.
You can?
Thank
Okay.
you for.
Is this good?
Yes, please start. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, esteemed colleagues, my name is Dennis Mapa, National Statistician and Civil Registrar of the Philippines, and in this presentation, I will share the Philippine practices in monitoring the Sustainable Development Goals. My talk will cover background on SDG monitoring in our country, our coordination mechanism, the relevant statistical products and policy support, our practice to monitor SDG at the local level, and lastly, our plans for SDG reporting. In line with the commitment of the Philippines to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and to ensure the effective monitoring of the SDG indicators, several legal frameworks were crafted to support monitoring, such as the Philippine Statistics Authority Board Resolution approved in 2016, which institutionalized the provision of data support to the generation of SDG indicators by enjoining all government agencies to provide the data needs for the monitoring of the SDG indicators. Following the approval of the 2020 Comprehensive Review of the UNSC, the Philippines also did its comprehensive review to account international as well as national developments for the refinement of the SDG indicators. Through a series of discussions with our stakeholders, the new list of Philippine SDG indicators was approved by the Philippine Statistics Authority Board in June 2023 and is composed of 17 goals, 97 targets, and 157 indicators. In the country, the SDG indicators are mainstream
in our Philippine Development Plan 2023-2028. This is a 6-year term plan of the administration for deep economic and social transformation to reinvigorate job creation and accelerate poverty reduction by steering our economy back on a high growth path. Moreover, the Philippines is currently finalizing our Philippine Statistical Development Program 2023-2029, spearheaded by the Philippine Statistics Authority, which includes activities that will steer data support, monitoring, and developments on the SDG indicators. While there is a chapter for monitoring SDGs in the PSDP, other sectoral chapters identified relevant activities that will address some of the data gaps on SDG indicators. Realizing the importance of the need for a whole government and whole society approach, the Philippine Statistics Authority serves as the center of the institutional mechanism for SDG monitoring in the country, with the Philippine Statistics Authority as the designated official repository of the SDG indicators, tasked to compile and maintain SDG indicators database and our SDG watch, to coordinate the generation and improvement of the SDG indicators, and to call on the international community, the private sector, and the civil society for assistance and advocacy. To promote an efficient and effective implementation of activities for the monitoring of the SDGs, and as the official repository of the SDG indicators in the country, the Philippine Statistics Authority established the SDG indicators focal points. This is composed of permanent and alternate focal points from 32 national government agencies. Further, the group plays a vital role in the methodological developments of the SDG indicators and in the efficient updating of the SDGs. In addition, as the official repository of the SDG indicators in the country, a team within the Philippine Statistics Authority was established comprising of 56 sector specialists and coordinators of the different interagency committees. Another coordination mechanism that has been instrumental, particularly in the review of the Philippine SDG indicators, are the various interagency committees being coordinated by the Philippine Statistics Authority. The interagency committees discuss the tier classification of the SDG indicators and possible activities that can be conducted to address the data gaps. In addition, the Philippine Statistics Authority Board is the highest policy-making body on statistical matters, and one of the resolutions approved and adopted by the board is the National Data Flow and Reporting Mechanism of the Philippine Sustainable Development Goals indicators through a PSA board resolution approved in 2019. In the course of our SDG monitoring, the Philippine Statistics Authority has generated various statistical products, including our SDG webpage, the SDG database, the SDG Watch, which shows the annual updates of the list of SDG indicators being monitored in the country. This includes the baseline, the latest, and the 2030 numerical targets for each of the indicators. And finally, we also have the SDG Pace of Progress, which the Philippine Statistics Authority generates yearly. This provides information on how much progress has been made by the country since the baseline year and how likely will the 2030 numerical targets be achieved. For the full realization of the achievement of the Philippine SDG indicators, the Philippine Statistics Authority regularly presents the pace of progress. The purpose of this presentation to relevant stakeholders is to identify areas that need prioritization, especially on regressing SDG indicators, and to craft strategies through a policy document to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs. Further, the Philippines is working on a program convergence budgeting framework for the SDG and the implementation guidelines on the utilization of the SDG fund pursuant to Section 9 of our syntax law, which allots 20% to finance programs, activities, and projects for the achievement of the SDG. The syntax law refers to the excise tax on alcohol, tobacco, and vapor products. In the country, SDGs are also monitored at the sub-national level. The core regional SDG indicators contain the minimum set of indicators for sub-national compilation and dissemination to facilitate sub-national comparison and to help the achievement of the SDGs. Currently, 13 out of the total 17 regions are already monitoring the core SDG indicators through their regional SDG watts. The Philippines will be conducting a capacity building before the end of the year 2023 to enable all the remaining regions to monitor SDGs next year and to estimate their regional pace of progress. A very promising initiative of the Philippine Statistics Authority aimed to provide additional data sources for SDG monitoring is the Community-Based Monitoring System, or the CBMS. The CBMS involves generation of data at the local level, usually cities and municipalities, which serves as a basis for targeting households for government programs geared towards poverty alleviation and economic development. Now, for 2024 CBMS data collection, the Philippine Statistics Authority will cover all cities and municipalities, and this will enable monitoring of 41 SDG indicators at the community village level. Moving forward, the Philippine Statistics Authority, in partnership with the UNICEF Philippines, is currently finalizing its online SDG reporting platform, which would shift data collection from paper-based to a web-based form, providing a technology-enhanced solution to automate the updates in reporting the SDG indicators. Again, this is Dennis Mapa, National Statistician and Civil Registrar of the Philippines. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And now open the floor for questions or comments. No, no questions, no comments. Yeah. Thank you. We will move on for the next presentation. About data for now. Charlotte Hansen, UNSD, please.
Hello, everyone. So I will talk about the Data for Now initiative. That's it's a big program, and it's a capacity building project that strengthens countries' capacity in the use of innovative data sources, technologies, methods, and partnerships for better and more timely disaggregated data for sustainable development, both for SDG indicators, but also national indicators. That's a priority for countries. It's co-led by UN Statistics Division, the World Bank, GPSDD, the Sustainable Development Solution Networks, and UNDP. UNDP joined quite recently as a partner. And those 5 institutions implement their own programs, but also work together. In addition, we have technical support from a range of countries and international organizations. Here we have a few: UN Habitat on SDG 11, Statistics Norway, FAO, Digital Earth Africa, and others. The initiative started in 2019 and has been going on then for quite a while, and is still going on in the future. So what do we mean with innovative approaches? We have sort of 4 overall areas. We have new partnerships. So we want to encourage national statistical offices and the national statistical system to create new partnerships with academia, the private sector, CSOs, and others. It's, of course, the use of new data sources. So anything that's survey-based, basically. We've heard a lot about geospatial data today. Citizen-generated data is, of course, also an area that we are looking into. Then it's also innovative methods. There's a list here. Small area estimation is something that's getting a lot of attention also. And finally, there's sort of the IT component of the initiative, which basically try to look into making statistics production more modern, more digital, and more automated than it might be in certain situations. Yeah, so here we have a few examples of what countries have been doing. So for example, in Colombia, there was a use of geospatial information for education-related indicators. Senegal has been working a lot on the IT architecture to improve their statistics production. Palestine is working on the use of satellite imagery and statistical information to produce SDG 11 indicators. Bangladesh has been working on small area estimations and satellite imagery to produce poverty estimates on very small geographical areas, and they've mapped those differences across Bangladesh. And also again in Colombia, they've used social media and machine learning to assess discrimination to support some of the SDG 16 indicators. Okay. So the overall guiding principle is that it's the country itself who decide what they want to work on. We don't have any specific areas of interest, thematic areas. So it's a national process that identify what the country want to work on. As I said, it can be both an SDG indicator, but it could also be a national indicator from a national framework that there is no data on now, but the country really needs data on that. So for the implementation process, the first part is usually quite long, where there's consultation in the country that's led by the NSO, because many of these indicators require cooperation between NSO and ministries, for example, and that's in itself something that's quite challenging. And then the country also has to identify what are the data gaps, what are the data need, and what are the different innovative approaches that they want to learn and use to fulfill those data gaps. And then at the end, we want to see that the data is out and published as official statistics. So we're quite optimistic about this process, and we see now that new data is starting to come out in the different countries. So at the moment, UNSD is managing this project that's funded by Italy and Norway, and you can see a list here of the countries that we work in. The use of satellite imagery is something that has a very high interest among most countries. Citizen-generated data is also something that's coming up. Small area estimation is another area that's very interesting for countries as well. If we look at some of the SDG indicators, it's around SDG 11, 9, and 2, I would say, that has sort of the most interest, but there are also a lot of other areas that are getting interesting. And again, it's really up to the country to decide themselves what they want to work on. And just the last slide. So we also work on more cross-cutting themes. So we are supporting the collaborative on citizen data. We're also trying to promote the cooperation between NSOs and academia as something we start to see in some countries, but it's something that both NSO and academia can benefit from. So we are kind of trying to integrate that into the project as well. And finally, the integration of geospatial data and statistical data is very important as well. So we are having this global seminar in Bangkok later this year that's aimed for national statistical offices and the national mapping agencies. And the idea is to have a high-level representation to meet and discuss more like the national cooperation across, cooperation between these institutions and how to work with similar concepts and sort of use one reference map. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation, Charlotte. Yeah, the next presentation will be about state of SDG measurement in Africa. Mola Asmar. From UN Economic Commission for Africa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, my name is Molla. I'm from the African Center for Statistics. I'm a statistician. I'm going to talk about the state of data availability and also a bit of statistical capacity building on the continent in relation to data. I have only 8 minutes, but I'm going to talk about the 54 African countries. Okay. Good. It's not my slide. Okay. I hope the time is not ticking. Yeah, 53, yes, more. Oh, yeah, but in the interest of time, I think let me also discuss a little bit on capacity building we do on the continent. We have some funding from Eurostat to build on data reporting dashboards for member states managed by member states themselves. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the topics I'm going to cover. Next slide. Okay, what we do in terms of reporting and dissemination, actually, this is a focus on our capacity building. We'd like to build capacity on SDMX, using SDMX to report on SDGs. Our challenge on the continent is that we have two agendas. I think they have the Agenda 2063 and also the SDGs. So we are trying to build how member states can report both agendas using these platforms. So we wanted member states to develop their own dashboard, managed by dashboard. If you ask me about the SDG dashboard, we have the 54 dashboard, which is managed by ourselves, which taps into the data from the global indicator database. But that's not the countries that they would like to do because they have their own geographic disaggregation, their own peculiar indicators, which speaks to the member states. So this is what we are currently working on, and also in terms of looking at how also their measure SDGs progress in their respective countries. This is a kind of knowledge product we're working on at regional level, sub-regional, and also at member states. Next slide, please. When it comes to us, we also try to look in terms of the perspective at sub-regional levels. We have the African Integration Agenda, which divides African countries into 8 regional economic communities. So we also try to look at if there are differences, peculiar similarities, and so on in this region. So we also build regional and sub-regional dashboard. Next slide. Another interesting capacity building we've built, I think some of you might have come across this, what we call the IPRT, Integrated Planning and Reporting Toolkit, which actually is trying to align national development to SDGs as well as the Agenda 2063. So we are also implementing, with this, they can report both agendas and also try to align with their national development agendas. So we've implemented this toolkit in a number of countries. We have demonstrated it to pretty much the whole of Africa, but I think some of countries are now using it to align and how these agendas are aligned. And these are also some of the knowledge products we are trying to help member states actually producing tracking progress, not only at regional, also speaking to the country levels. We are also producing what you call a data situation report on Africa, which is coming early next year. We're also compiling a report on alternative data sources. I think this is also one of the area we believe would help countries to fill the gaps. Next slide. When we look at data availability, I think these are the main criteria we look at: insufficient data, whether the data is enough to measure progress. I think that's very important. We look at also data quality. Again, at regional level, you may ask, how can you measure quality of the data? But at least we can look at, we validate, in terms of direction, in terms of, how data behaves over the years and so on. We also, interrogate this, the global indicators database actually, when it comes to Africa, how, member state agencies especially are putting data. And we found so many issues in terms of data quality, I would say. Data disaggregation is, with the notion of leaving no hand behind. We also look at indicators, whether they are disaggregated. And timeliness, how, like the age of the data, how old the data is, like speaking of the current phenomena. And comparability, because we like also to speak the region, the sub-region. So we like data is comparable across time. And this is like a snapshot of data availability. The green areas are where data is pretty much okay to measure progress. Like these are the 17 goals, but we have a file that, but those, the white areas are those data. There is no data for any of African countries. I think if you look at goal 2 and goal 15, we pretty much have data to measure progress. But if you look at goal 16 and also some of the goals in the middle, they are scattered and also red. So that means that data is not enough to measure progress on SDGs. Next slide. Maybe to also give you a snapshot, I'm speaking of at regional level, indicators with at least one data point. There are 71 indicators with all the 54 countries, at least one of the disaggregated variables. We have the 27 to 53, which speaks to the 50% of the African countries. We have 104 indicators, and there are 19 indicators with no data for any of the African countries, I think. And the 54 indicators are less than of the member states, less than half of the member states have data. Disaggregation, we also look at in terms of disaggregation, again, 90 indicators, no data at all, no disaggregation for 65 of the indicators, 94, 25 to disaggregation. At least when we say disaggregation, it may not necessarily disaggregation, but at least there are 2 variables in the global indicators database. So this is how it looks in terms of disaggregation with regard to Africa. Again, we also look at targets. We know whether we can really measure targets in terms of assessing progress. 33% of the targets are not measurable at all when it comes to Africa. Next slide. This is also, we also try to look at, we have this concept of 3-year data point. It's not data point because there are so many disaggregation. I think if you look at the disaggregation in terms of Africa, we have 3,700 variables in the global database for Africa. So I think when people speak of 231 or 248, I'm surprised because those are not the variables we really deal with. We deal with over 3,000 variables when it comes to SDGs. So then we say we need to have 3-year data point, like not 10 data points for 1 year for the disaggregations, but at least 3 different years. So you see how African countries are really suffering in terms of data availability when we look at, and this is from the 2015 benchmark. Again, this is at least 1 data point. This is also, you can see some of the countries Data availability, we say 57% of the indicators cannot be used for any data analysis. And that is really pretty bad for Africa. Again, continue. This is the data currency or data edge or timeliness, you can call it. We also try to look at how one indicator stops at 2015. I think if you look at 2019, 12% of the indicators are 2019 and below. And 2020, which is 3 years behind, 27% of the indicators are like 3 years behind. Continue. Tier classification, I think I always ask, go back please. Tier classification is very important for Africa. When we say their methodology, data is regularly collected at least for 50% of the countries or population. I think when it comes to Africa, looking at from the database point of view, that is really need to look at. So we need to have a different way of classifying objectively from the tier classification, especially for African continent. I would say that it's more challenging in terms of tier classification when it comes to Africa. Next slide. So this is the progress we have. We did progress where we stand today. And you can see a few of only a handful of targets are going to be achieved. I think 4 of the targets. The others are stagnated or slow progress when it comes to the measurable targets. Next slide. So I have also put together some of the mitigation measures to mitigate the challenges when it comes to data on SDGs. I'm not going to read, but alternative data sources very important. Integrating with different data sources. I think this has been alluded by other presenters. And also we may not confidently say data that is not existence in the member states. We need also encourage countries to report and make their data available online. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mola. The next speaker is Hassan, Mr. Hassan Masood, about science and the SDG Nature's Project. Eight minutes.
Statisticians, I got the impression. Sorry about that. Just very grateful to Yongi and to colleagues from UNSD for inviting me to come and also to say a few words. I wasn't really expecting it. My slides are very boring because I'm not I don't often do presentations in meetings like this, but I do have a few props here, so hopefully that might make up for some of the boredom. My name is Hassan Masood. I'm a science journalist. And I work for Nature, the International Journal of Science, where my responsibilities are quite varied, but for the purposes here today, I look after the teams that do our editorials, which is very much the voice of the publication. And on a sort of day-to-day basis, we often have things to say, particularly in relation to science and policy, science and funding and other things. Nature is very old. It was set up in 1869, first prop here. This is the first issue. Adverts
on the front page, and no images. And then this is our 150th, which was in 2019. So it's changed a lot. We publish weekly, roughly 7,500 issues in that time. Please don't quote me on this. I'm sure there's an error bar that I haven't mentioned. And since that time, we have been joined by many other publications in the Nature Journal. You know, we are very much multidisciplinary across as much of natural and social science and engineering and translational work as well. But now we have journals in climate change, in human behavior, Nature Methods, a meta journal. Nature Cities is one of our newer ones, Nature Water, Nature Food. And you can sort of start to see that we, without necessarily being very conscious of this, we've been publishing in SDG-related fields. The first slide that you see, just the one before, was 1974. This was Mario Molina and Sherwood Rowland on the paper, which confirmed, or certainly first confirmed the role of CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, and HFCs in ozone depletion. The next one after that is from 1978, and this one is a supplement we published called, a word that you don't hear very often, climatology. Before we had global warming, in those days it was called thermal pollution. Before climate change, before climate science, we kind of thought, well, we'll call it climatology. And this was the sort of the beginnings of the use of general circulation models, particularly by Met offices. They were the custodians, what you might here call the custodians of that kind of data. And they started to write about what is going to happen. They started forecasting what's going to happen if CO2 continues on its present trajectory. And it was basically, reading it now, it looked like a sort of a big giant funding proposal for supercomputing, which of course they did in the end get. The one after that, if you sort of fast forward to today, is from 2023. This is a review, the literature on the different ways in which you would value nature, the natural world. And this comes out of one of the assessment reports from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, which is the equivalent of the IPCC, the climate panel, but for biodiversity. And I guess many of you would be working with that. And just the very final paper that I just wanted to talk a little bit about is just the one that's next, thank you. This is something that we're increasingly starting to do now, which is analysis of very large data sets. And this is specific to the SDG in education. This was published a few years ago, and it just gives you another approximation around, particularly in some of the goals and the targets around SDG education. As you're probably starting to see, and as we are as well, we began to notice that our authors are increasingly writing in their manuscripts when they submit them to us that, my paper is relevant to SDG X indicator, Y target Z. And, we did a little bit of investigation. We realized that a lot of universities, pretty much most of the larger ones globally now, have institutional SDG strategies. I guess this is not going to be news to you. It's very much news to us. And they would make a point of mentioning this because it's important in their own internal institutional performance indicators as much as anything else. Also on their websites, it's in their other research fingerprints that they use to in the different ways in which researchers communicate. So the world of sustainable development goals is now a big sort of integral part of the academic experience. At the same time, we also started to see just more and more studies, more than, certainly in my own working life now, many more studies that use big data sets. And of course, we're now morphing out of big data and into, large language models and other forms of AI as well. And so that's kind of affecting what we're doing as well. And so when it came to the midpoint September meeting, we just thought that we should see what more we can do. Clearly there's a sort of organic movement around the goals, within our readership and within our publishing as well. So what more can we do? And so we thought we'd put out a call for proposals, which is the next slide. Thanks. Yep. And this is you can see it on our website. It's just an invitation to all of our readers across all of the different nature journals to just submit more science. and other forms of publishing in this space. You know, there's still some years yet to go, and we felt that this is a good opportunity. It's not something that's necessarily additional. A lot of our readers are doing it anyway, but some may not be aware, and so we just wanted to sensitize them. What are the kinds of things that we're interested in? Just a quick rundown. Of course, there's primary science, which is, you know, something that's new, that pushes the envelope of knowledge, of scholarship. We're also interested in, you know, in what we call review or perspective articles, which is a sort of a snapshot of the state of a field at a particular time. You know, perhaps a 5 or 7 year horizon. Just if a reader needs to very quickly get up to speed on something, they could just read this one article. It's about 5,000 words long, and it's, you know, got most of the relevant references and then summarized for a reader. We are increasingly more and more interested in verification and replication. I think this is, I know it's increasingly important to your community as well, particularly given the many ways, the many different sources of data you have, the many different organizations, institutions working in the same space. It's just really, really nice in science to be able to, you know, for us to sort of see that if something's been done, someone else has repeated it, tried it again, made some modifications. So verification, replication studies are becoming a really big part of science publishing. And of course, there's, you know, commentary, opinion, and other forms as well. This is something that we published, again, just to sensitize our readers. It's a series of editorials that we ran over the summer ahead of September, and it's just one editorial per goal. So there's lots of our readers who, you know, leaving aside 17.8.1, they probably don't even know what 1 or 2 is. And so for that community, you know, what is it about the goals? What are they? Where do they come from? We just sort of summarized in these editorials some of the progress or lack of, but increasingly or essentially we included in the articles 1 or 2 examples where researchers are actually doing things to make a difference, you know, where they published, not necessarily with us, but just published more generally, and they're working with, you know, communities like yourself. And finally, just the final slide there is, this is for the reader who literally isn't aware at all, and is in our universe. There are, you know, I'd say probably a quarter to a third. So you notice there that we don't even use the word or the phrase SDG. There's no sustainable development in there because that is just, you know, completely will not resonate. And so, you know, the language there is much more accessible. And we did it in the form of a quiz. Again, this is essentially mostly for scientists still, but we just wanted to find a way to just capture that sort of sliver, that subset of people who are outside of it. Very happy for your questions. And thank you again, Yomi.
No.
No? Sure. Whatever you say.
Or at the end. Okay. No. Do you have any questions? See, Steve, please.
Thank you. It's great to see Nature, a journal of this stature, take an interest in the SDGs. So a question around the call, I guess that's just a call for papers, but have you considered maybe doing a special edition to try and capture maybe the full breadth of, oh, okay.
Sorry, it's the one prop I forgot. I'm so hopeless. Here it is. It's the 14th of September issue, so if you go online, you'll be able to see it. But I'll give this to you, Yongi, so you can take it. There you are.
Oh.
Yeah.
Very good.
You're allowed another question, by the way. It's all right.
No, that's it. Thanks.
Jordan, please.
Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. It's very nice, very lovely one. Just like to ask you 2 questions. In these papers, do you take specific cases, and whether these papers use quantitative, qualitative methodology, or something else? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. So on the if you Google Nature call for proposals SDGs, you'll get to the page, and within that, each journal will have its own criteria. There are, you know, many different journals. Essentially, all of the journals are participating. You know, broadly, I would say they're similar, but they have their own specifics. I would say that for the journal that I work for Nature itself, it would be, if it's in the primary research space, then we are primarily quantitative. And one other indication of that is that we publish very little in the humanities. In fact, I don't think we publish any humanities. I think it's almost entirely quantitative social science, natural science, engineering, technology. So that would be what we would do there. But other journals are doing qualitative work as well. The one, of course, exception is that if it's commentary and opinion analysis, that kind of article, then that can be a qualitative argument. But I would sort of just add to that if as long as it's backed by data. Yeah. Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah, UNICEF, please.
Hi, thank you. João Pedro from UNICEF. As Steve said, great to see nature coming into this space. So one question in UNICEF and actually WHO as well, often teams go to Lancet, right? And even to announce new work, new reports. Is this something that Nature would be interested to consider as well? Like it's kind of like a commentary about, a new database or a new global indicator that it's been launched. Yeah, would that be of interest? Thank you.
I think it's so we have quite a large in old media we would call a magazine section, which is conventional science journalism, where in my previous life I spent a lot of time in. So that may be where we would consider information or things like that in the way that the Lancet would. I think in our sort of in our research publishing side, there would need to be something additional. I mean, oftentimes we will get approaches or proposals for articles which are based around published reports. And I think what's changed, I mean, we might have done this maybe even 10 years ago. I think what has changed now is that everybody in this room is a publisher. Anyone who's got a phone can publish. And so because, and you're just so amazing at it. I mean, just looking at here, my slides are like completely rubbish compared to, even though I'm supposedly the professional here. It means that when we're then considering things to publish, then the bar has become higher. And I think, but what we would do is we'd work with you. You could approach us and we would then have a conversation and say, well, actually, out of your report, what is the gap? What's the knowledge gap that you filled? What is it that you're adding? What's the additionality? And then we'd work with you. We have a lot of editors who do that. So there are ways around it. Yeah. Thanks for your question.
Any more questions or comments? No? So thank you very much for your very good presentation. We invite the next speaker. It is... Yeah. We invite the next speaker, Charlotte Hansen from UNSD, that talk about the GIST, the Global Network of Institutions for Statistical Training.
Okay, so I will tell you a bit about GIST and two products that GIST have been developing over the last years. So first, the Global Network of Institutions for Statistical Training, also known as GIST, is a network of international regional institutions and national statistical offices who work together to build sustainable statistical capacities through efficient, effective, and harmonized delivery of training. And many of the agencies present here today are actually members of GIST. So GIST is organized around 3 task teams and a translation group. It's a fairly new group. So task team 1 works on sustainable statistical training, and I will tell you about the statistical training assessment tool in a bit, so I will not go into detail with that one. Task team 2 is working on e-learning and what we call community of practice. And they've been quite active together with the IAEG to developed this UN SDG Learn statistics community platform that I will also tell you about. Another thing that they're also working on is on, for example, effective online training, because we see more and more of that, but how do you do that in a good way? Task Team 3 is on statistical literacy, and they actually very recently launched a quite cool inventory called the Statistical Literacy Initiative Inventory that is kind of like a page where you can find all sort of good practices on statistical literacy initiatives around the world. It's a way of, it's a platform where you can learn from what others are doing and basically copy and do the same thing. And then recently we have this translation group because a lot of the learning materials available online and other places are in English. And of course we have other languages in this world than English. So French, Spanish, and Arabic are some priority languages that we're trying to look into to translate some of all these learning materials into to have a much wider reach. So moving on to these two products. So first of all, the UN SDG Learn website is sort of like a hub where anyone can learn about the SDGs, not specifically on statistics, but on all areas related to achievement of the SDGs. Under that website, there's the statistics community page, which GIST and the IAEG have worked together to develop. And this is where we have all these different learning materials. And there are different ways to navigate on the site. You can either find what you want based on a sort of a statistic search or a statistical area, or you can search via an SDG that you're interested to learn about, or to have if you have a specific indicator you want to learn about how you calculate that one. So once you're on the learning page, you can search for different type of learning materials. So we have courses. The UN SDG is a hub that links to other websites where the original document is available. So the page itself does not offer, that's not where you can find the online courses or the materials available. It has links to other pages. So we have courses available. There are events, different micro-learning, which are very short, like 5-10 minutes video or short presentations. And what we call resources, so that's handbooks or books or documents that's sort of readable. And you can search by statistical area, the 5 ones I already mentioned, but they're divided into sub-themes, so you can be quite specific if in your search functions if you have a very specific interest. And of course, you can also search by language. And there, of course, there will be a lot of the material that's available in English. We have in total around 193 different learning materials available on UN SDG Learn on the statistics community page. And we want, of course, much more there. So we invite everyone to look at the site to see if your online courses that you have or useful handbooks and etc. If they're not on the page, please reach out and we can easily make a link to your learning materials. So moving on to the statistical training assessment tool. GIST had sort of a few years ago done an analysis to try and see what different countries are doing with regard to training statisticians and equipping them with the skills they need to produce official statistics. And it kind of showed that countries have very different approaches. Some do a lot to train their staff, and others don't have any approach at all. So this tool was developed to meet that need there is to have a more strategic approach to train staff and equip them with the skills they need. So the tool sort of seeks to identify or help countries to identify, prioritize, and meet training needs. Looking at the NSO from the staff perspective. So what do the staff think that he or she needs, both for people working in statistics production, IT communication, but also the administrative functions that are crucial for a statistics office to operate. And then we have a focus also on what do the manager thinks, in particular with regard to looking in the future, what kind of skills are needed in the future. And then there's also an opportunity to assess what are the needs within the national statistical system, which is also very important, and particularly in those countries where the statistics system is very decentralized. So there are 3 questionnaires to help identify the current skills level and the training needs. We have a guidance document that help countries to prioritize because there will be a lot of training needs. And we all know that we have all limited resources, so we need to prioritize. And how do you do that? So we have sort of set up some different criteria to take into consideration for when to prioritize. And then once you know what you want to train your staff in, how do you meet those needs? How do you produce a training strategy for your statistical office? How do you put together a training program? What type of training do you offer? Looking both at informal training and more formal training. We also have a special focus on training new staff. And then also because we want to increase the use, of course, of all these available resources that we find out that's online, also specifically in after COVID. So we have a special section also that goes through all different kind of websites where there is actually online resource available. That should be kind of easy to click on, but of course the big challenge is to decide which online courses do you then use and offer. The purpose of STAT is country owned, so it's not a tool that's owned by UNSD or GIST or anyone. It's kind of just a tool we give the country to take ownership of themselves and to try and think more strategically about training. And to prioritize and then build up a sort of like a national training strategy that's based on the needs that the staff has. And also to help countries to identify where does resources come from to train. And we also really want this tool to be used for countries to go to the international organization or regional organization and say, see, these are the needs that our staff has. Can you please help us with this? Because sometimes we see it's the other way around. That is the international organization that has courses available and then the countries get that, but it's not necessarily always meeting their specialized needs. So then next steps we are still finalizing the statistical training assessment tool. We are piloting at the moment in 6 countries. Of course, we need to have an electronic version of the questionnaire, so it's easy to gather the results and fill in, of course. And there will be a guidance for countries also how to analyze the results. So we expect the tool to be launched in early 2024. We see that this tool can also help increase the use of all the learning material that's available on UNSDG Learn. And it might also be that we see that there are learning materials that is still not available online that could be very useful for countries to have access to. And we think that GIST and IAEG together can work to see how we can fill some of these learning gaps that are there. Thank you so much.
Many thanks, Charlotte. I think we have time to some questions and comments. No? No questions? No. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Daniel from UNSD.
Yes.
A capacity development needs assessment.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dennis. Yes, so I am the last man standing before the coffee break. Luckily, this is a short presentation just to give you what we did with some assessment that we run every year. So that for the last 3 years, the IAEG-SDGs, as one of our tasks is to, as a secretariat, to run a questionnaire every year, focusing on 6 sections, and one of them in particular is on capacity building needs towards the SDG. So this is just a snapshot of the questionnaire. We have started with like 50, 60 countries reporting for the first time. Now we have about 108 and counting. I saw a couple of responses coming in this week because some member states here were reminded to to respond to the question. So that's a good thing. But the questions on the capacity part touch several issues like coordination, data availability, voluntary national review, statistical activities, multi-stakeholder engagement, as you see here. And we wanted to kind of gather the opinions in this regard. So for this year, for the 2364 countries already responded to this part of the questionnaire as of a week ago, and we are trying to extend the deadline to 30th November, but we think there are more countries who could provide information. But this time it's more nuanced than the previous one. So this is just a snapshot of the areas where the questionnaire responses are coming. You see the gaps there. We're hoping some of you were here could respond to the questionnaire. We have 3 regional commissions who also replied to our question, and then a quick summary of what they're talking about capacity development assessment. So from the 108 countries, you see that the highest in terms of interest is on dissemination, visualization of the SDGs. That's still an ongoing topic. We had a lot of capacity building in this area, as and agencies in particular also doing many works in this area, but still comes up higher. Disaggregation, as it was mentioned, I think in Mola's presentation, you have seen the issues with disaggregation, and there is still demand on that. Availability, as we always do every year, review this availability. I think this is also on the countries' thoughts, which you see the top 3 are here, but a considerable number of them have responded to certain areas. So from down to VNR support, which is about 18 countries are really interested in doing this, compared to, and then dissemination about 38 countries. So it's just to give you a food for thought. Countries are responding this area. They are still valuing all these sections, multi-stakeholder engagement, disaggregation, data availability. So as you see it here. So it's just to give you a highlight on this, and this would supposed to lead a discussion, but it's an idea that we have this. If we are missing anything in this categorization, you're welcome to chat with us during the coffee break. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. We have a coffee break, 20 minutes only. 3:40, come back.
Hello and welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a lovely break. We're coming to the end of our agenda, so I would ask you to please take your seats. We are at the session 11 on data innovations and initiatives for SDGs. And our first presentation is Big Earth Data in Support of Environmental SDG Indicators by Yu Chen and Li Huang from the International Research Center of Big Data for Sustainable Development Goals. So I'll turn the floor immediately over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tamara. And it's my great honor here to introduce our work about big Earth data in support of environmental SDG indicators. I'm Lei Huang, and I come from CBAS. So it's for the first how to page down. Okay. It's my first time to attend this conference. So at first I want to introduce CBAS first. CBAS is the International Research Center of Big Data for Sustainable Development Goals. It was established in 2020 based on Chinese Academy of Science. Our vision, in brief, is open data and accessible technology, shared ideas and knowledge. At present, we have 46 leading experts from 12 countries. And in total, we have almost 200 scientists and staffs. And, sorry. About our capacity, including 4 parts. The first is infrastructure. We have a platform for SDG, a big data platform, storage and calculating. The second is about the data and the products. We have our special SDG satellite 1, which was the first SDG satellite, especially for SDG data, and based on different kinds of satellite. We have released more than 100 data products. The third is about our knowledge about scientific reports. We release the report annually about environmental indicators. The fourth is our partnership. We have built a global network with different institutions and with UN organizations. Here is our report about the big data in support of SDG reports. This is released annually since 2019. At present, it has more than 147 case studies to provide decision support and more than 100 data sets. Traditionally, SDG progress were monitored from surveying, and here we use big Earth data, which integrate satellite, navigation, internet, and surveying and other different data sources. Using big Earth data, this year we have evaluated all of the 92 environmental indicators which were defined by UNEP have been evaluated this year in China. And we find that half of them have been close to or have achieved the 2030 targets. About the method and the data source, I will take SDG 13 as an example. We know that SDG 13, climate action, is the most data deficient among all of the 17 SDGs. We evaluated all of the 8 indicators in SDG 13 using different source of data. For example, we use satellite and statistics to evaluate the loss in disasters and the greenhouse gas emissions. We also use the artificial intelligence analysis of policy and regulatory taxes to evaluate the national disaster reduction strategy and the national adaptation strategy. And we also use the internet media about such as the Weibo in China, like Twitter, in other countries and serving data to evaluate the climate change education in youngs and in schools. And we also use statistics to evaluate the funding for climate change. Based on the data, we also the data with spatial temporal information. All of the indicators with spatial information are integrated together, like this in different layers, and we can evaluate the spatial imbalance and the temporal change of the indicators, and we find the change. We can find the changes in the eastern and southern parts of China. And so the spatial temporal information also shows the nature characteristic of different regions, and it provides the spatial-based solution to promote the local SDGs. For example, in southeast part, which is populated regions, and in the west parts, there is much less populated regions. They have different SDG progress strategies. Based on the 92 indicators, the different stages and trends, we classify the indicators into 3 types. The first type is indicators with great challenge. The second type is with certain challenge, and the third type is the indicators that are close to or have been achieved. Based on the indicators with great challenge, we propose mainly 3 general policy suggestions to the government. The first is strictly implement water resource conservation and protection for indicators like SDG 6 and 14. And the second suggestion is about to continue to increase the substitution of renewable energy for fossil energy to promote SDG 7 and SDG 13. The third suggestion is to set up more protected areas to improve the marine and territories biodiversity to promote SDG 14 and SDG 15. On global scale, we are also doing the same work by integrating various environmental indicators. We are trying to analyze the global environmental state and trends since 2015. At present, we have collected 20 different indicators. And we are also analyzing the environmental stress from population and economic growth. The final conclusion is still ongoing, but we have some conclusions from different single indicators. For example, in SDGs 2, we found that in 2020, most of the global cropland is single cropping, and only 14% is double cropping. If we can fully unleash the potential of the cropland, it's expected to increase 0.23 billion pounds of grain, equivalent to about 6% of the current global production. For SDG 6, we monitored the global water body quality. It's found that compared with 2015, an overall increase in trends in the clarity of large lakes in the world was observed in 2020. For SDG 13, global human-induced carbon emissions rebounded to the pre-pandemic level in 2021, and then further increase by about 1.5%, 1.5% in 2022. Also, global carbon sink showed a significantly increased trend since 2000 to 2020. For SDG 14, we integrate satellite and ocean reanalysis data for a 3D coral reef bleaching thermal environment system to provide support for regional coral reef protection. For SDG 15, we monitored that global tree cover increased by 673 million hectares from 2000 until now, with different patterns across the world. So this is a brief introduction about our work, and we are expecting to give more contribution to global SDG indicators. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll open to a couple of questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Okay, I see none. So we'll move to the second presentation under this item, AI and machine learning and SDG monitoring. Ranjula Baliswan from the Stockholm School of Economics and Södertörn University. Please go ahead.
So in the lightning talk, I forgot to introduce myself, but now Kara has, thank you. And I'm research director at Center for Sustainability Research at Stockholm School of Economics and a professor of economics at Södertörn University. And together with Yonggi, we have been looking at reviewing this field of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And of course, we know that AI can enable about 134 of the 165 SDGs across all goals, but it may also inhibit 59 SDGs. But that's not our objective. Our objective is to see how we can use AI and machine learning in monitoring SDGs. And I don't need to talk to this group about the lack of data. This is one of the figures that we have from a recently updated figure, in fact, from a paper that's forthcoming. And if we look at the disaggregated SDG data, we see that it's about, on average, availability is less than or about 20%, and no country has greater than 50%. So lack of data is a big problem. We are midterm, and we have a limited amount of time to address this problem. And as I'd seen in one of the earlier presentations, less data is more problematic for goals 4, 5, 10, 11, 13, 14, and 16. So how do we solve this problem? And one of the solutions is artificial intelligence. And amongst other things, we can use artificial intelligence primarily by, especially for our purpose of monitoring sustainable development goals, by focusing on machine learning and natural language processing, etc. There are a whole lot of other things that AI can do that we haven't kind of experimented with so far in monitoring. And driven by machine learning and the fact that we have this unprecedented data, one of the examples was the former presentation that we just had on from China. And the fact that we now have availability of powerful IT infrastructure, we can actually use the science of machine learning, where computers can automatically learn from without explicitly programming rules, and then generalize the acquired knowledge. And the way we have been, some of the examples and some of my own work that I've done, I mean, the way we can use it is in terms of using machine learning through supervised learning, where we would have either qualitative or categorical variable of interest, in which case one can use machine learning to resolve classification problems. Or if you have quantitative variable of interest, then one could use regressions and thus forecasting, estimating, and predictions and imputing missing data. And so that's how machine learning can be implemented, and primarily through, in terms of theory and models. There are a whole lot of different models that are out there. I'll just take out a few, some of which I've used in my own research. So deep learning theory, for instance, which is more about, very simply, about deep neural networks to learn about complex patterns and data representation. And then probabilistic programming, where the idea is to use Bayesian modeling and data analysis and decision-making under uncertainty. And while we have been using this for monitoring SDGs, I think that it can also be effectively used to inform policy and also to mark progress by looking at interlinkages, something at which we have looked, in terms of using Bayesian modeling. And I think it's also important not just to lose sight of the fact that it's not about SDGs in silos that need to be monitored, but the networks that exist within. And then finally, also automated machine learning systems, where it's more about feature selection and model selection. So, I wanted to say a bit about the data. I mean, we have predominantly several representatives of national statistical organizations here, and we know that we are struggling with declining response rates, with primary data, and the fact that we already have a lot of data that is available in the public domain, and the private statistical agencies are also exploiting it. There is this question on how the NSOs have to evolve their role. And I would argue that artificial intelligence and machine learning could actually be implemented not just on primary data, but also on secondary data. On register data, on linking multiple databases together, and so on. And then, of course, we also have to begin looking at alternative data. And when we talk about that, big data is one example, with the 3 V's of, the volume it provides, the velocity with which the data arrives, and the variety and heterogeneity that the data has. And so we had examples from our former presentation on satellite data, but then there's also data from social media, and then which is flexible, which is granular, and which is also very timely. So I wanted to bring that a little bit. And then, of course, emphasize quickly that the core values of official statistics are about quality, about reproducibility, about transparency. And thus, it is important to kind of identify the indicators that would measure the quality, make sure that the machine learning results are also transparent. And we also need to take into account, some of the other limitations of using machine learning, which is in the form of algorithm bias and the lack of fairness that has yet not been captured in existing monitoring. And we cannot also do away with, we need to do posterior analysis. There's a need for it because the carryover effects might come through, and so to decrease the risk and to assess the use of specific machine learning techniques, we would need to do that. So with that, let me just leave you with some of the ways in which artificial intelligence and machine learning can be used for SDG monitoring. I didn't have the space to put in examples for all the sustainable development goals. These are examples of some of the studies that have been performed. So when it comes to SDG 1, it's about mapping poverty with big data. We had an example of SDG 13 and I think 6 and 2 from the former presentation. So I won't go into that, but then you have like smart grids, you have smart governance, SDG 17 in terms of financial aid, SDG 16 in terms of surveillance and planning decisions, and so on. So here are some of the examples and ways in which SDGs, machine learning and artificial intelligence can be used for SDG monitoring. And whilst we have to be cautious of the limitations, I think that given the time constraint and the limitations that we have in terms of data collection, or the data availability, it is a valid option to explore. So I thank my co-author, co-researcher Yonggi for working on this together, and we hope to continue doing more work on this. Thank you.
So open the floor for a couple of questions for Ranjana. If you have a question, please put up your hand. We have a question from Moldova.
I was personally always afraid about these concepts, artificial intelligence and machine learning, looking at these movies with the intelligence capturing the world and killing it. I wanted to ask, so we have now 7 years of implementation of 2030 agenda, and we all were talking that we indeed have been allowed to use other types of data instead of official statistics or in parallel with official statistics, which we need to complement to do it quicker, to provide, some additional insights on the phenomena which are measured through official statistics. I just wanted to ask, do you have one example maybe of experience at the global level, maybe maybe not necessarily for you, but some of your colleagues, when indeed an initiative on using artificial intelligence and machine learning as an experiment has resulted in this product becoming and being owned by a statistical office. So becoming part of the official statistics, or at least being co-owned, if not fully owned. Because otherwise, our wish is so that we can make it part of official statistics somehow sound like dreams, not at least one example, or at least not a finished initiatives, but maybe which leads to a more or less result in which this product being produced by artificial intelligence or machine learning is co-owned by the statistical office.
So I know that I have papers published way back in 2015 where we are already looking at machine learning and coming up with, in fact, very useful results. That paper, for instance, I didn't have the time to put it up in the presentation, looks at female literacy, child mortality, and women GDP per capita, and tries to look at the relationship and finds like interconnections that are not possible. And so those interlinkages and that kind of work has been done in research. I think, well, when I've looked at some of the literature that is out there, I think that there is some collaboration going on with the NSOs, but I haven't please give me time to kind of pick it up, and perhaps I can share the details with Yongi and then she can share with you. But I mean, there are initiatives taken, and if they are not, we should go in for that. There's nothing, science fiction about AI. I mean, we've been using it for a fairly long period of time. It's just that we haven't been using it. It's just standard techniques, and Bayesian modeling, for instance, has been relatively around for a long time. So that's one of the machine learning modeling that, we can use. So thanks.
And we'll take one more question. I think it's from our colleague from Nature.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Angela. You tantalized us at the beginning by saying there are 59, is it 59 indicators where AI could inhibit. Can you say a bit more about that? And are there consequences for those that have a more positive impact? Are there other interlinkages, in other words? Thank you.
Thank you. I shouldn't have put that there because that wasn't what the presentation was about. However, I'm just thinking very quickly. The fact that AI is used, for instance, could result in short-term losses of jobs in certain industries. And that would be like one step forward and a kind of trade-off between AI and use of AI and loss of jobs. So sustainable goal number 8. So those are the kind of trade-offs. So if we go very, one by one through the targets and the sub-targets, then it's easier to point out. But right off the head, that's the example that I can think of. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And because we're still a little bit behind, we're just going to move on to the next presentation. So thank you very much, Manjana. The next presentation is the UN Data Commons for the SDGs, Yonggi and Daniel from UNSD.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would like to present this UN data modernization work of UN Statistics Division, and also one recent output that we just launched during the SDG Summit. Next slide, please. So we have this UN data modernization project. It's in the context that it's in the context of response to the UN Secretary General's on the data strategy, also informed by the CSSA, the roadmap for innovating UN data and statistics, I think published in 2020, if I was wrong, like Steve can correct me. And so this also UN modernization project is also endorsed by the UN Secretary General's Executive Committee. Next slide. So I skip this, and so the overall objective of this project is basically increase the visibility and access to the authoritative source of statistical data and metadata, and we know there's like too much data exists here. So if you search any data then on the internet, you'll find the different values. And it's basically recently my son is doing a project and try to find some developer data, and there's a lot of different value come out. So we want to use this to present this authoritative source of statistical and data and metadata. Metadata is also very critical, important. And we want to improve the search and analytical capability for policy and decision makers, and also enable the interoperability of statistical data from across the whole UN system, hopefully member state and other partner organizations in the long run, and also enhance the data value through the meaningful interlinkage across the global, regional, and national different data portals. And so the working principle of this project is basically, as I mentioned, we want to harness the UN authority, credibility, and the name recognition to unify efforts of and the collaboration across all stages of the data lifecycle, and also ensure the trust in data through data quality and follow the standards, and develop capacity for stakeholders and to both contribute and use this common model and data infrastructure. So I know there's a lot of jargon, but this basically it's the guiding principle for this project. And maybe I'll just talk about the recent partnership that we with Google Data Commons. We started this partnership with the Google Data Commons in May, and so it's about 2 years project. The objective is develop a customized self-hosted knowledge graph, leverages the semantic web technologies and standards built on the ground layout back in 2022. So basically the initial stage, which was launched in September, is focused on SDG database data, and we use our global SDG database. And in the long run, the key components of this collaboration with Google include cloud infrastructure, natural language processing, machine learning capability, and automated data pipelines, the user-friendly API and front end, as well, like also capacity building and communication outreach. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the main objective is we want to moving towards a distributed UN data knowledge graph. Don't ask me too much about this because I'm not so technical to answer your question. I have a colleague back in New York leading this technical part of work. So the objective is to capture the concepts and relationship required to establish explicit and implicit link to external resources, and then making data more easily basically findable, searchable, and usable. And also build applications that are very efficient to access the related data and in multiple domain, and also generate insight by reasoning over complex relationship, and also the credit incrementally add new data and involve the data schema to accommodate new data type and use cases. So we were going to do some live demonstration really soon, so you can instead of the jargon. So we'll actually launch this SDG data commons for the UN data commons for the SDG during the summit on the 18th of September. And this is the first version because we tried to finish this very quickly in 4 months' time. And we have very powerful data visualization and also have very advanced natural language search functionality, also make it easy for user to access, explore, and utilize the data. So I pass over to Daniel to give you a live demonstration.
Thank you, Yongi. I know it is hard to grapple with all the the keywords here, but the gist of it is trying to use natural language processing as our advanced search facility. Just to give you a bit of the slideshow, I'll show you a couple of examples on the tool itself. Mola from ECA was explaining about variables versus indicators. So he was saying, even if there are 231 indicators, technically we're dealing with more than 3,000 variables. So that's what we're trying to do. All these 3,000 variables, how do we make them easier for an end user to kind of get the contents out easily and have some insights? We have the structures, the basic search facilities by goal and by country, and then an NLP interface for doing human-like queries so that you get some answers. What does the NLP do? So it's like questions you can ask saying hunger in Costa Rica. And then it will give you some numbers from the SDG. It brings down all the reports. And then how about poverty? And then it will also give you data related to poverty about Costa Rica because it knows the previous question. So it's more of a ChatGPT-like question, but this is more focused, and then the result you get is from the SDG database. It's not cramped from anything else or not created out from custom sources. You can also do some comparison. You can write compare poverty in sub-Saharan Africa or in these 3-4 countries. Or you might be interested to see regional data. So we have this in our database, but that's not that easy to find them. You have to know how the SDG global platform works, and you have to know how the SDG regions are classified. And those are the things you need to know. But for somebody who has no idea, but this will give you, so I have to do now the live demo. So I have to switch screen. So bear with me just a couple of seconds. I have learned a lot of tricks these 2 days. So there you go. This is the page. Just to give you a highlight, this is a landing page. It has very simple, intuitive classification. So you have the countries and areas, you have the goals, and you have the search. You can start searching a country from here. One thing we normally don't have in our global SDG database, when we say countries, we only have countries or areas represented. This time we also integrated regions. So you could technically search data for Africa. You can say Africa, and then it gives you information Africa with some maps, with charts. This is new, but it has been in the database, but you have to know how to filter the annex in the database. We have also the thematic areas, right? So goal 12, so you can go through this goals 12 about, and we have also brought some of the report we shared earlier, some of the storylines from the report and the key points here from the report. So trying to make the report part of the data work also, it's easier for you kind of to navigate. This is very easy for policymakers. You just show them this is where we are, they can see where the data is missing. So you see the globe here. Why is it gray? Because there's no data reported for such and such. If you also go back to the home just to show you, this is the one we were talking about, the search facility. So how many people go hungry in the world? This is a text you type, and then yeah, so it just gives you the information on the world, right? And then I could say, how about poverty? So it knows I'm searching about the world hunger. Then when I say, how about poverty? It's like more human query, like it gives me data on poverty, all right? So I could say, how about poverty in, I don't know, Kenya? So it just gives me details. All this is coming from the database. It's really just a dump of the data. It just gives you information with different visualizations, right? Okay, it's too much about Kenya. So why are you going? So I could say Europe. So it's not a country, but it's a region, right? So you see the map here, and so the map is just a snippet of the area, but you can also explore. There is a specific tool that's created for it. So you can see the map explorer here, poverty, Europe, you can pick one. So here it's more on kind of people with some statistical background. They know the kind of the classification, and you can go further and dig into it. And then you can change here. So you can see, okay, the bottom places, the top places, and you can also extract this and put it in your PowerPoint or in a report. Or you can, okay, this is about poverty. So if I switch to clean energy, then it will also switch on the spot. So, and this is about goal 6. So you see the data from 2007 to 2022. You can also see what data points we're using. For Russia, for instance, this is 2022 data. So I don't know if you go around, well, you see most of them are 2022 because it's Europe. But if I switch to a different region, I have to see the screen. So say South Africa. So it's, I don't pick any country, but that's the region. So here, so you see the gaps here. So you saw the difference between Europe and Africa. It just gives you right off the bat the issues, like when is it the data available, who is doing well, who is not doing well. So this is the power, but I just want to show you in like 2 minutes to see what can be done. And this is also incorporated with what Yonggi was mentioning at the beginning. This is data commons. This is a project, a research project more by Google, who they are, all this is open source and all the data is available there. So we have been collaborating with them in developing this. And you might ask, okay, if they get the data, why don't they do it on their own? They can't. Why? Because all the knowledge on SDGs is driven by us. It's us who are telling the story. It's us who are creating the storylines, because they are numbers people. They will see the data and then they just plot. But we'll tell them, oh, you cannot plot this like this because X and Y, right? Or you cannot call this country as such like this, or you cannot group them here because of this and that. They don't know that. So that's where the knowledge of the community helps. That's where the IAEG comes in. That's where the custodian agencies come in. So going forward, we're trying to grow this into a UN data, larger work. So for the next steps, I'll let Yonggi explain it. Yeah.
So in the short term, so we have the
Move it back. So sorry about that.
So another good function of this tool is we try to link the data and the analytical output put together. Basically, this year, in short term, we link the key message from the SDG report with the data. You can use them and learn together. So for the next iteration and towards the 2024 session, so before now, in the next 4 months, we want to fully incorporate data sets from some of the pilot agency, create a new thematic and data provider landing pages. So that's including WHO, ILO, and I think UNICEF, and also Regional Commission, ICLAC. Also provide the partner agency tool to streamline their data integration workflow, and also refine the natural language research capability. And also maybe in the future, we want to look into the other analytical publication from this partner agency and to integrate this with the data they're going to put on these landing pages. So with that, we invite you to explore the UN Data Commons. Thank you.
Thank you, Youngie and Daniel. I think we can take one quick question. Colleague from Tunisia.
Yes, Daniel, thank you for the presentation. Just my question is simple, straightforward. What is the source of data that is presented? We have through our experience, even though in the UN databases there are contradicted data for the same country, for the same indicator, what is the source of that? Thank you very much.
So for the first project we have is basically the international agency, because we want to ensure we use the data that's validated by the agency, and then they're comparable, because we're looking at the data across the globe. So we know there's some data discrepancy issue between country data and the global comparable data, but there's a different reason because of the timeliness, the different definition, but this is mainly for the global level consumption. Basically, can ensure the data comparable. In the next round is still we use the UN data, basically WHO data, ILO data, and the UNICEF data.
Okay, because we're behind, I'm going to close it here. And we're going to move to the next item on this, and this is the SDG Atlas. Umar from the World Bank, if you could please come up.
Oh, thank you. Do you have the... And I'll talk for a few minutes, and then there is a video, huh? So, and you have assured me it's going to work, right? So. Do you have the thing? So yeah, I'll be talking briefly about the Atlas of Sustainable Development Goals. It is kind of our attempt at storytelling using the SDGs. Now, why do we do this? Huh? And so a lot of the focus of this room has been on trust in data, right? We put out statistics that people can trust, that stand the test of time. But at the same time, it is also important to examine the potential of data, right? Like what we can do with data, tease out what we can. And an inspiration from history is many of you have probably heard the name of Florence Nightingale. Huh? She was the lady with the lamp. She tended to wounded soldiers during the Crimean War in the 1850s. And she also went on to revolutionize modern nursing. What you probably don't know about her, I didn't, is that she was a statistician and actually an avid data visualizer. So she analyzed the really horrific living conditions of soldiers in the hospitals. And she concluded that it wasn't the battle wounds that was killing them. It was more the poor sanitary conditions, dirty sheets, you know, the toilets and so on, that was killing them. And she used visualizations to make the point. She used a variation of a pie chart called a rose chart to do this. And she did this, and she was relentless. She tried to convince the general public, the doctors, and other people in the hospital and the policymakers that sanitation matters for lives. And actually, nursing has never been the same since then. So this was kind of an example of data saving lives. And visualization was one of her very favored ways of communicating. And she in fact said that whenever I'm infuriated, I revenge myself with a new diagram. Now, compared to then, today we are inundated with data, right? And we focus really very earnestly on data gaps. We want more data, and at the same time, it is also our role to tease out more insights from the existing data that we do have. And the SDG Atlas that the bank produces is one such initiative. And we do have I'll skip through these, a history of doing maps. This is 1966. And Yonggi, I don't think you were even born then. Huh? And this is what we used to do. All we had, the data was on population and GDP. So this is GDP per capita figures. And look at the maps also. So Andrea, you see your country, Italy, looks like a stylish boot here. Huh? So, but again, it may seem I'm kind of making fun of how rudimentary this is or how things were in 1983. But again, this is data people could trust, right? It stands the test of time. And we must not forget the focus of that. Now, when the SDGs came along, of course, there was a lot more data then. And from the World Bank, kind of we felt, okay, there is so much data around and we have expertise and we want to tell our stories. So the three things came together. The maps evolved into the Atlas of Sustainable Development Goals, and we have produced a few versions of it. And finally, it's the 2023 version. And here, over the years, it has evolved. We don't quite do a scorecard and so on because Yonggi does it. And if I were to say hunger is on track and off track, I would piss off FAO. So we have kind of stuck to, in a sense, our lane, right, of giving perspective. And I think the more, the better. And this time what we did is that we focused on interlinkages between SDGs, right? Because say, if there are more jobs, the economy grows, right? So both SDG 8.1 and 8.8 are benefited. But then does that tank the environment, right? Does it adversely affect SDG 13? So these are kind of just very interesting questions, and Yonggi has actually published a full book, but that is kind of what we do. And there are two videos, but I'll just show you one. And this is how the page looks. Please check it out, our SDG Atlas. And it is on progress and challenges in ending extreme poverty. And in this work, actually, we look at the trade-off between extreme poverty alleviation and greenhouse gas emissions. And the results are quite optimistic, actually. And this work is actually published in the Nature Journal. It'll be forthcoming there. It just got accepted. My colleague Daniel Mahler and Philip Wohlberg wrote that work. So can I click on it to play it? Oh, can you? Can you do it? Okay. I have another video, but I think I'll skip that. And just if you could go to the last page. No, the next page after this. Oh, okay. Okay, so please check it out. It is an online publication, and again, we took a lot of pain to make this open data, open code, so that the results are replicable and usable, and we have some associated products with it. Thank you so much.
Okay, we can take one question, Paramar, if there is one. No, I see nothing. Thank you very much, Omar. Super interesting. Okay, we have Valerie Bizier, Innovation in Exchanging and Disseminating FAO SDG Data, the FAO Data Explorer.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I think I'm the last one, so I'll be short and quick so that we can move to the last part of the meeting. I just want to share our experience in FAO into adopting SDMX to exchange and disseminate our data. This is a modernization project that goes beyond the dissemination of SDG data, but we initiated the project with the SDG data domain of FAO. Just a little bit of background, FAO has a very decentralized statistical system, internal system. Statistics are produced across 9 divisions within FAO. So it resulted in a multiplication of data platform, statistical database that are completely incoherent and sometimes not interoperable. So that was identified as one of the main weaknesses of FAO in terms of making their data, our data, more used and allowing for cross-domain analysis. So we embarked in modernization project in 2020 to really move towards a centralized statistical data warehouse and a once integrated dissemination platform. We looked at various tools and data and metadata management system, and we decided to adopt SDMX and some IT tool. Next slide, please. So the IT infrastructure behind our statistical data warehouse and our dissemination platform, FAO Data Explorer, is the .stat suite package developed by the Statistical Information System Collaboration Community. So it's a community composed of a growing number of national, international organizations really working in statistics. I think at the moment the community has 16 members. The development is led under the OECD, but it's really a co-development and co-innovation platform in terms of developing the tool. I think many of you here are familiar with this. We also use the metadata and data manager from eStat as a complementary tool to facilitate a migration to SDMX. So within the stat suite, we use .stat core and .stat data lifecycle manager for the backend of our statistical data warehouse, while the .stat data explorer is the really front end and dissemination platform. While the
ESTAT MMD manager is also in the back end. So if you look at the next slide, here how we revise basically our workflow processes and IT tool based on the SDMX. So the first set, so on your left, this is what what is already there. Basically, it's our processing, the processing stage of our data. So this is done through an internal statistical working system. In some cases, we have complementary system to process our data, and we have a centralized master data management tool to basically manage our classification. Here, the part more on the right, which has been circled or squared in red, is the new part of our workflow. So we have established at the integration and maintenance level, so the statistical data warehouse, like I mentioned, using the MDE manager and the stat suite module. So here we fully manage in that area the SDMX structure and data. This is where we do the transfer of data structure definition and SDMX structure, and we export our data in SDMX. And then we have the final component, which is the dissemination and reported component. And here we have the FAO Data Explorer for dissemination of data and metadata, as well as reporting to UNSD of the SDG data to the global database. And we do that through API. What we have learned to this process, first of all, we greatly improved our quality. Like I mentioned, we have a decentralized system. So, and we were managing the input from the different division through basically Excel table and so on, and some ad hoc quality control measure on the data that were provided to us by the various technical unit involved in SDG reporting from FAO. So by establishing a centralized dissemination unit that really manage the SDMX workflow, so the two last component that I just showed you, we were able to establish better routine of quality assurance on our data. We were also able to work with the various units to build standard in terms of all the reporting that they will do, not only for the SDG, but for the coming data platform that will be migrated to our statistical data warehouse and dissemination platform. So we established a common observation status list for all our database, some cross-domain code lists, for example, for unit of measure, country lists and country aggregates, so that we really recommend all the technical unit to start implementing those standards in their current database, so that we can we can move faster in the integration of this data in the FAO Stat Explorer. So FAO, we active member of the IAEG-SDG SDMX working group, and we share their experience and help improving the data methodology. So we have so the milestone that we just achieved in September with the dissemination of the FAO Data Explorer with the first data domain, the SDG data domain, contain basically 60 different data sets. So we have 21 SDG indicator, but it's basically 60 data series. And the data are
exchange directly with UNSD, like I mentioned, through API. It also serves in other platforms. We have our SDG data portal where we have visualization in Tableau, where we use also API to source the data for visualization. So this is our team. There's a little bit of overhead here. Not all of these people have worked full-time on this. In terms of effort, what we can say is with one project manager that can manage the internal and external coordination between the technical unit, but also with the community, with one IT expert that can help with the deployment of the IT tool, one good data modeler, and two data analysts that can help with preparing the data for the migration in NDMX, we can achieve a lot. I think it's, if you have to establish a core team to go that route, that will be a recommendation. So here you have the link to the FAO Data Explorer, and encourage you to visit it and provide comments. It's a beta version, so it's open for comments in terms of how we display the information, the future, the functionality. So please feel free to provide us comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to take any questions, but there was the email there and we will have the presentations for everybody. So please reach out to Valerie and the team should you have any questions or want to comment on the beta site. So thank you very much. Okay, so we're on item 12 and we have 13 minutes. Work plan and next steps. It's up to you, whatever you like. Let's go. Okay. Okay, the work plan and next steps. Oh, waiting for Daniel. Excellent. Next slide, please. The activities of the IAEG between now and March 2024, so between now and the commission, we'll prepare the report for UNSC 55 and our November and December meetings. We will have the monthly meeting on November 22nd, and then in early December 2023, the IAEG will also hold their member monthly meeting, and these are virtual. Between January and March, we will have monthly closed meetings with the dates to be determined, and we will have a biannual open meeting. This is usually a side event from the Statistical Commission and for one, and the other one is the open meeting that we have that is an in-person meeting. So our first one is usually been virtual side events. So it looks like that will be the case. Slide. Between March and February 2025, focus on the implementation of the indicator framework, including a particular emphasis on geospatial information and elements, data integration, and non-traditional data and data innovation in support of monitoring SDGs. In addition, we'll continue to share experiences, best practices on monitoring SDGs, including on SDG platforms, dashboards, other progress assessment tools, communication of SDG data, data storytelling, data disaggregation and inclusive data, data innovation, and national efforts in bridging data gaps for SDG indicators and capacity development needs, opportunities, and recommendations. And of course, we'll carry out the work that we usually do, which is regular review of methodological developments and issues related to data and their metadata. We will also refresh the work stream on data disaggregation to provide further guidance to countries and liaise with other working groups and existing mechanisms for data disaggregation, so no duplication. We'll review the work and work plans of the IAEG-SDG working groups on SDMX and geospatial to ensure they're in line with the work of the IAEG. We'll continue the work on the task team on sustainable tourism. And our big challenge will be to prepare and conduct the 2025 comprehensive review and continue dialogues with custodian agencies to enhance data flow processes for global reporting and hold the biannual open meetings, including the 15th IAEG-SDG in the fourth quarter of 2024. And of course, members will continue to interact through our regular meetings. So that is our work plan for the next year. Thank you. We could take one or two. Oh. Do we have any comments or questions about the work plan? Awesome. I think everybody wants to finish. Yes, Peter, can I ask you to take the floor? So we're going to be closing out, and we'll start with our colleague from Denmark, Peter. He's going to give us some remarks.
First of all, thank you very much for joining us in Copenhagen for the past 3 days. As a new face in this group, this has been very inspiring for me to join you this afternoon and feel the enthusiasm of this group. And now with the summing up of the work lying ahead, also highlighting the important tasks that are lying ahead of us. I'm afraid on certain items we are running a little behind in Denmark, but we will do our best in the coming year to be on top of everything. I hope you have enjoyed your stay here. My colleagues told me that someone had said it was the best IAEG lunches ever. So I hope you enjoyed that. We are also honest people. We believe in Denmark, so we have not organized special weather for you during these days, but we have the normal everyday rainy days of October in Copenhagen, and this is what we have to put up with for the coming 12 months, more or less. Well, thank you very much for coming here. I wish you all a safe journey back to your homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Okay, so thank you to everyone for participating in the 14th meeting of the IAEG-SDGs. Over the last 2 days, we've heard some sobering statistics related to stagnation or even deterioration of the situation facing the global community. But this is a concrete illustration of the power of the Global Indicator Framework. The framework provides the measurement. They are the mileage markers on our journey. And I'm going to ask Daniel to put up the final slide. It's less impactful now. Okay, I'm going to continue. It's a concrete illustration of the power of the indicator framework. The framework provides the measurement. They are the mileage markers on our journey. As a result of the pandemic, it appears we've been driving our bus in reverse and in a snowstorm. I'm always going to make a link to snow because I'm Canadian. But despite the stormy weather, there remains a glimmer of hope, which the optimist in me clings to, which is the global community has the tools to address the issues, and the statistical community can continue the crucial role in continuing the implementation of the Global Indicator Framework, providing high-quality, robust statistical information. Policymakers can use this information to put the bus into drive and to move us forward and out of the storm. And by the way, that's Ottawa. And indeed, we can drive our bus on the Autobahn, where there is no speed limit. So there is hope that we can achieve much of the agenda in the last 6 years. As a statistical community, we heard some very interesting presentations on implementation, monitoring, and reporting over the last 2 days, showcasing innovative work within the NSOs and international agencies. And I was excited to hear how these groups are focusing on reporting for vulnerable groups to ensure we leave no one behind. We've had a lively discussion regarding lessons learned to date, and we need to harness these lessons to help pave the way and provide the GPS coordinates for the next development agenda so that our bus does not go off the cliff. And of course, we note that the 2025 comprehensive review is the next piece of major work for our group. So over the next several months, I would ask you to continue your amazing work that you've been doing related to measurement, including focusing on increasing data disaggregation. Also, please pay close attention to the comprehensive review timelines and guidelines that we provided this morning, and the presentation will be online for all of you. I would like to thank our colleagues at Statistics Denmark for hosting our group, Niels for agreeing to host us, Peter, Lars, Annette, and the other Statistics Denmark colleagues. Thank you for your support over the last few days and for the preparation, and I know this was a lot of work. To our UNSD colleagues, thank you for the excellent Secretariat support. To my IAEG-SDG member colleagues, thank you for sharing the chairing duties and for your very active participation. And to all others, thank you for attending and sharing and contributing to the discussions here and to your important work. With that, we can close the meeting, and I wish you all safe travels home and look forward to seeing you in the virtual world and hopefully in person sometime in the not too distant future so you can help us drive this bus out of the snowstorm. Thank you. We're done.